Howdy, it's K-Bex and welcome back to my channel. So this time I thought I would have a look at the pilot episode for Supernatural and break down exactly what lessons I have learned from it that I can apply to my own writing. If you don't know, Supernatural is my favourite TV show. I have loved it for years. I still continue to watch it endlessly. And part of the reason why I love it so much is the compelling characters and the wonderful narrative arc, which of course is all set up in the pilot. Now, I'm not really a big fan of pilots in general. I really struggle with the first episode of series because obviously they're trying to do an awful lot at once. And Supernatural is probably the only pilot I truly love, even for other TV shows like Buffy and Charmed that I really like and think have really good elements to their pilots. I think that Supernatural's pilot episode really blows them out of the water. To help me with my lessons that I've learned from the pilot episode, I've got my little Dean Funko Pop figurine who's gonna sit pride of place up here, making sure things go smoothly. Okay, so I had a rewatch of episode 1 from season 1 to kind of figure out what it is about this episode that makes it a standout pilot for television. In order to catch you up, if you've never seen it before, go watch it if you haven't. But it starts off with what looks like a typical family home in America, and you have a mum and a dad who have got a little boy with them who's 4, so Sam is the baby, Dean is the 4-year-old, and everyone goes to sleep. It seems like a normal night, except for things look a little creepy from the outside. For example, the tree shadows are moving by themselves, the lights start flickering, all that sort of stuff that we as an audience are familiar with in terms of the horror genre. To give a quick Cliff Notes version of what happens in the episode, Mary, the mum, gets woken up in the middle of the night by Sam crying. She goes to sort him out and then sees that her husband is stood over the crib, so she goes off to go back to bed. But she notices that downstairs there's a noise. And when she goes down, she realises her husband actually wasn't in the baby's room at all. He's downstairs asleep. So she runs back and is confronted by an intruder. We don't get to see the intruder's face. We don't even get to see the interaction between her and him. We just get to hear her screaming. And then John, the dad, goes racing upstairs. And he sees that there's blood on the baby's pillow, and he looks up and sees his wife Mary pinned to the ceiling, blood everywhere, and then the ceiling bursts into flame. And the house goes up in flames. He gives the baby to the 4-year-old, tells him to run out of the house. He goes back to try and save Mary. Of course, that's kind of impossible at that point. And then that's when the opening finishes with them on the lawn and like the fire and rescue there and the police, and you could tell that this is just now a very incredibly broken and damaged family. So once I've gone through what made that opening so good, I will talk through other bits from the rest of the episode. Just so that my first point is nice and clear, the opening of the episode actually mirrors the ending of the episode. So by the ending of the episode, Sam, as a grown man, he will come home to find his girlfriend pinned to the ceiling bleeding, and the house sets on fire, just like what happened with his mom. One of the brilliant parts of this episode is the way that the opening and the ending is mirrored and how traumatic that is. It builds up those high stakes that are already established in the opening, and it lets you know that there's more to come later on. And also I really appreciate even the finer details. For example, the mum, Mary, and then the actress playing Jessica, his girlfriend, they both have a lot of similarities. They've got long blonde hair. In their death scenes, they're both wearing white nightgowns, so it really accentuates the idea of innocence being brutalised in front of the family. This is important because of everything that happens from here on out feels really personal, because of not only has Sam had his mum robbed from him, he's now also had his girlfriend robbed from him, and he needs to figure out exactly what has done this and if he can get revenge, basically. Now, the opening with the family is only about 4 minutes long, but it really shows the high stakes, as I've already said, and also creates a lot of tension. Like I said, there was shadows up on the wall of the house, the light flickering, the music, and it really takes its time. 4 minutes doesn't sound like a long time, but for an opening for a horror TV show, because essentially that's what this is, it is quite long, and a lot of it isn't dialogue. A lot of it isn't even really a lot of action. Most of it's slow paced, but that really lets the tension fester, because particularly when you start to see little things that make you, that's not right, like the fact that there's a noise downstairs and the TV's going and Mary's suspicious and starts walking down. We as an audience also feel that suspicion. So obviously I know that this is a horror, but I think that tension is incredibly important no matter what genre you're working in. And in your own writing, I don't think you should rush that opening. You might have a prologue, for example, that's super short, but when you hit the ground running with your proper chapter 1, take your time with it. Make sure that you are really letting us get the atmosphere, that you're really showing us what genre it is, because if that's what Supernatural does very well, it immediately lets us know that this is going to be horror slash fantasy, I guess, because of the different creatures that are in it. It lets us know that right from the get-go through its choice, in this case through the choice of music and the imagery. We can also do the same thing. We obviously won't be able to use music, but we can use the imagery. We can have really long drawn out sentences punctuated by short sharp ones that really create a sense of anxiety. And even if you're not doing a horror and so therefore don't need a load of tension in your opening, you still want to really establish the equilibrium of this character, what's their everyday like, and take time to get to know the character really well, probably through dialogue and action rather than through lots of description. And also, much like in Supernatural, you need to make your stakes seem high and personal right from the get-go, no matter what those stakes are. The stakes could be, if it's a romance for example, them putting their heart on the line. Are they somebody who's promised themselves they'll never get into a romantic relationship again? Are they closed off from love? Or is it that they are somebody who's going on an adventure and they have a personal stake in whatever is going to happen? Lord of the Rings, Frodo has a personal stake in that this ring was given to him because it was Bilbo's, and Gandalf is a friend and he's telling him, please look after it. And so that makes the story personal to him, meaning that later on, even when he could give up the ring and give it to Elrond at the council, he decides not to. He decides to keep hold of the ring because he knows that other people are being easily corrupted, and he feels personally invested in this now, as we also feel personally invested in him. And in Supernatural, we feel personally invested in Sam's journey, trying to figure out what did this to his mum and what kind of life that's made them lead and what's that going to mean for the future for him. And we need our characters in our stories to also have that driving force and motivation. How is this going to be personal for them, and why is it so important? And that leads me on to my other point about Supernatural. Now, technically, we are introduced to the characters of Sam and Dean when they're very little, but of course, that's not really the characters we get to know and love throughout the series. So we get to see Sam, over 20 years later, when he is almost a grown man basically, and he is at university. He's with the girlfriend Jess that I mentioned. We really establish their relationship, and so within the next 2 minutes of the episode we get to see why Jess is so important to him, the life he's created despite the opening and the fact that the family have had everything destroyed. We also then get to see the introduction of Dean as a grown man. So Jess and Sam go back to their home, they live together, they're asleep in bed, and in the dark of the night, Sam hears a noise. Now, of course, after the previous 4 minutes, we are very suspicious at this point. What could be happening? What's in Sam's home? And then there's this beautiful cinematography of the living room in kind of silhouette. You can't see people's faces very well. And then there's a fight. And it's not until the end of this fight that you find out that the person Sam is fighting, his intruder, is actually his brother Dean, and Dean kind of mocks him, has a bit of a laugh, and there's a kind of a camaraderie. You can see the teasing there, there's an instant relationship between them. Now, this fight brings up a couple of points that help me with my own writing. One thing being that using enigma really helps, because we didn't know that was Dean until the end of the fight. Obviously through TV we can obscure kind of the faces through lighting, the costume and all that sort of stuff. In your writing, perhaps you've got first person perspective, and if the character can't see their face because it's too dark, then it achieves the same purpose, that we have no idea what the outcome of this fight is going to be because we don't know who it is they're fighting. And another lesson that I learned from this scene is the relationship is being established immediately. Sam and Dean literally only say probably about 4 lines to each other before Jess walks in the room. Those lines are so brotherly and teasing, and then also very heavy and weighty once Jess walks in, that you can't help but feel this long history between them. You feel this, you feel that they've grown up together because they've got this complete knowledge of each other, and the teasing back and forth and all that sort of stuff.
Sounds about right. I swear, man, you gotta update your cassette tape collection.
Why?
Well, for one, they're cassette tapes. And two, Black Sabbath, Metallica, it's the greatest hits of mullet rock.
Well, house rules, Sammy. Driver picks the music, shotgun shuts his cake hole.
And of course, these two things together create the inciting incident. And you've got that opening, even though it was over 20 years earlier, and then this moment with Dean coming into his house. Collectively, they make the inciting incident because of Dean is there to tell him that Dad is on a hunting trip and hasn't been home in a few days. This line does a lot to establish kind of the family lore and lets you know, without revealing too much, lets you know that that opening scene really had an impact on the family and that Dad has been irrevocably changed and so have the boys. In your writing, you don't want to give away the game completely right away, but you do want to explore a little bit of the lore and therefore the relationships at play. So if you don't have, say, a supernatural or fantasy setting, there's still going to be some sense of lore involved. It's just not going to be otherworldly. So you want to establish what the characters mean to each other. You want to establish the history of what's happened to the characters before we catch up with them. The lore in this episode is actually quite small. Now, if you've watched Supernatural, all 15 seasons, you all know that the world of Supernatural and the lore of Supernatural is anything but small by the end of everything. Even by sort of season 2 or 3, it's pretty big. And by season 5, we've got sort of world-ending apocalypse going on and God and the devil and all that jazz. But in season 1, episode 1, and matter of fact, most of season 1 to be fair, but particularly in episode 1, it's about this small world. It's about the family and the family unit and what they mean to each other, and the fact that now Dad's on a hunting trip and hasn't been home in a few days. They've got to go find him, they've got to reunite. They haven't spent a lot of time together because Sam's been at uni, which is clearly a decision Dean and also the dad didn't agree with, and so there's a bit of friction there. You can feel that history. It feels very lived in. And they don't explain everything, they just let us as an audience kind of guess it along the way, but there's enough there for us to feel the friction between them. Just little comments like the fact that Dean keeps saying, yeah, you've said that you need to be back on Monday at Stanford for your interview, and he clearly isn't happy about that. Or the fact that Sam feels Dean kind of dismissing the interview that he needs to be on for Monday for going to do the next part of his learning journey and to get his law degree, and he clearly doesn't think that that suits Sam, but he's keeping it to himself and he's hiding his feelings from Sam, but not very effectively, so that we as an audience can still see that. And you want to do that with your characters too. Have them have things that they're clearly keeping to themselves, but we as a reader can read between the lines and go, I think this is what's actually happening here. And you can play with that and later on twist that on its head and make it something unexpected, but begin sowing seeds of doubt or hope, depending on what your story is. I also forgot to say, in the fight scene, not only do we establish relationship and obviously a bit of enigma and excitement, but we also established the skill set of the brothers. Last time we saw them, one of them was a baby and one of them was 4 years old. Now that they're grown men, what can they do? What are they bringing to the table? We know this is a show about two men being hunters looking for their dad, taking down zombies, ghosts, whatever. How are they able to do that? Well, they've obviously been training. And so whilst Sam is at uni, we don't really see that side of him. The minute Dean enters the picture and there's this fight, the fight has a purpose, the action has a purpose. There's a reason for it, not just to excite the audience, but to show off that Sam and Dean both have a particular skill set that they probably wouldn't have had if the opening hadn't occurred the way that it did. So for my own writing, I like my action to show me something else other than excitement. Don't get me wrong, I love writing a fight scene and I love it being actually quite gory and bloody and brutal. But there has to be a point to it. Maybe the protagonist is learning a lesson whilst this is happening. Maybe they're showing a skill that they picked up earlier. Maybe they're showing actually a deficit of skill that they need to kind of overcome by later on in the story, otherwise they're going to fail. And so make that action purposeful. Does it actually reflect the way that they move, the way that they speak, the ideas that they have? Does it show me something about them as a character and what is important to them? That line about Dad's on a hunting trip and he hasn't been home in a few days, that sets us off on a couple of scenes back to back where Sam and Dean are by themselves, they're on the road, they're talking through kind of their family history. This is the only bit of the episode I find really clunky. It's inevitable in every pilot that you're going to have a bit of exposition drop, And a lesson to be learned from this for your own writing is make sure that exposition is as minimal and smooth as possible, because of a couple of the lines, more Sam's lines than the Dean's lines. Yes, I know I'm a Dean fan, but I'm not picking on Sam unnecessarily. But Sam's lines are more like, they feel abrupt, they feel a bit cringy. Like, for example, out of the blue, he says, yeah, but the way Dad raised us, hunting constantly for the thing that killed Mum and raising us like soldiers, it just feels too much because Dean already knows all this. And it feels unnecessary in that conversation, as if they're only doing it for the audience, and we don't want that. Same for your writing. Don't just put in exposition for the reader. It still needs to feel natural between the characters. The characters need to be able to ask questions, or if they already know everything, maybe they need to share it with somebody who doesn't know everything. Because in that scene with Sam and Dean, they both knew everything, and therefore the only person they were telling was us. And it felt too much. If they pared it back a bit, maybe just 2 or 3 sentences less, it would have made the difference, I think, and they could have revealed those things later on or in a different way, maybe to someone else who doesn't know what's going on. So make sure that your exposition is to the point, specific, and doesn't feel awkward or out of place. The rest of the episode I really like because they're trying to find Dad. They're going on the hunting trip that he went on to figure out what steps he took and why he suddenly disappeared. And John, the dad, has left a load of breadcrumbs for them, really, particularly at the motel room they're staying in. There's all sorts of things taped to the wall, lots of clues. So they have to accomplish this mini goal to achieve their bigger goal. Now, they don't know that by the end of the episode, they won't achieve their greater goal. In fact, they won't really achieve that greater goal until near enough the end of the season. Spoiler alert for anybody who's not watched it. Go watch it, please. They will have hints of their dad earlier on not wanting them to find him. Tells them, you know, they need to go and do the job because he's actually on the hunt for the thing that killed their mum. And then, of course, that spurs Sam on because he thinks, well, if he's on the journey to find the thing that killed their mum, well, then I want to find Dad even more because I need to join him on this fight. It's more personal to me. I've lost 2 people, whereas John has obviously lost his wife, but Sam's lost both his mum and his girlfriend. At the end of this episode, we've still got plenty of things to keep us wanting to go on later on. Now, if you want to treat the first episode a bit like one of a series, fine. Doesn't matter what you compare it to. By the end of your arc, you need to have tidied up all the loose ends from the opening. You need to consider what needs tidying up by the end. So if you're seeing this as book 1 of a series, you're probably not going to have absolutely everything in a nice neat little bow by the end. You're going to want to set up things for future stories. And I've already said this in a previous video, even if your book is supposed to be a standalone one-off, your characters, if you want them to be believable, they've got a future. They're supposed to be going off and doing other things once the final page is written. So still make it feel like there's something. Don't leave your readers dissatisfied. Don't make them think, well, we'll never find the answer to this one thing. But give them little tiny nuggets for them at least to, in their headcanon, think, well, I can imagine these characters going off and doing this thing later on in life or whatever. But if you are carrying on to another book, you're going to want to have this bigger goal stretched out, but you will need these little goals in between, and loads of series do that. Film series do it really well. So Harry Potter, obviously, each individual story, you kind of overcome the villain, but then something happens that teases what could happen the next year. It never is closed. The whole story with Voldemort isn't closed until the very final book. In this case, everything with the Yellow-Eyed Demon actually doesn't really get resolved until the end of season 2, and the consequences of those things still spill out into season 3, 4, whatever. You can see how important this goal was from the get-go, and that leads me back to the idea of a goal inside a goal, because if you have the greater, bigger picture, and then you've got the mini steps to get there, and that helps create pace. In your own writing, you're going to want to have these mini goals so the reader feels these kind of build up of tension and action, and then these lulls in between, rising and falling until the big final climax. You do want it to tie together. It can't be sort of random moments that don't really fit in with the themes or ideas. And that's what brings me back to this episode of Supernatural, because of the case that they're on about the ghost woman who is luring men to their deaths.
Take me home.
she murdered her children and she is suffering in the afterlife. Now, that's not what's happened to Sam and Dean, but there is this theme of family and death and what grief can do to you and how it can change you. And I like the fact that their first case, while also being based upon a real urban legend, is also something that ties into their family and the mythology of not only what they do and the hunting, but also it ties into them on a thematic level as well. And I think that's important. What happens to your characters should tie into who they are, not just what they're doing. Alright then guys, that is my breakdown of why Supernatural episode 1 is so good and what lessons we can learn from it for our own writing. If you've got any other ideas about why episode 1 is so awesome and what it teaches us about writing and about crafting characters and pace, please let me know in the comments below. Or if you've got any ideas of what other TV shows or films etc. that you'd like me to look at to dissect at a later date, also pop that down in the comments below. And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.
Don't forget, he's a bit he's kind of maybe cut that out, I don't know. I'll finally take this off. Oh. I can't release myself. I'm stuck. It's pretty though. I see Supernatural. I'm sure there's many of a fan out there with this as a tattoo. I think, was it okay?